So the sneak peek leak for Boruto TBV Vortex Chapter 21 has just been released, and we are heading into the spoiler week for the next Boruto chapter. And what we do get for the sneak peek is quite important, as it does end up revealing a lot about Sarada's awakening of the Mangekyou sharingan, and whether Sarada actually knew that she awakened it. In this sneak peek, we have a flashback scene of Sasuke and Boruto talking about this very own topic, where they discuss the awakening of Sarada's Mangekyou sharingan. And we also have the V-Jump cover of Boruto, where we have a Boruto and Kawaki. So we have a lot to talk about in today's video, so we'll first end up talking about the sneak peek, then we'll discuss the cover. This is what we end up having as the sneak peek, and we are reading the translations. These are not necessarily the official ones, but these are the best translations that we can have at the current moment. We have a Sasuke who starts off by saying, "Something truly serious must have happened. It goes far beyond what ordinary people can comprehend. Something incomprehensible." And this is essentially referring to omnipotence and everything that is going on, because the scene in which Sasuke is reminiscing on is one right before Sarada ended up awakening the Mangekyou sharingan, when she was essentially pleading to the likes of Sasuke that something is happening and they are wrong for pursuing the likes of Boruto. As we have here with Sarada saying, "Papa, Boruto didn't do anything wrong. There's no way he'd kill the 7th Hokage, just no way. Everyone has been tricked." We go back into that flashback scene, having Sasuke say, "Everyone, we've all been deceived." That's what she said, and she's probably telling the truth. Sarada's Mangekyou, to me, with that alone, is enough of a reason to believe what she says. More than anything, it's undeniable proof. Essentially, Sarada's Mangekyou sharingan was what proved to Sasuke that this was in fact the truth. Everything that Sarada said to Sasuke was in fact the truth, and thus he believed her. And we also have something that is quite interesting to see, is that we have a Boruto who has this bandage around his eye, which does indicate that this probably took place quite shortly after Sasuke and Boruto ended up leaving. It didn't take place a year after that or a couple months after that. Him having that bandage around his injury ends up telling us that this ended up happening quite recently, after the scene that we saw in chapter 80. We can see a Boruto that is kind of surprised here, as this is the first time that he ends up learning about Sarada basically having the Mangekyou sharingan. Sasuke continues by saying, "This situation, as we face it on, that eye will surely become a great source of strength." It seems like Sarada herself still wasn't fully aware of the fact that she had awakened it. The time will surely come when she fully awakens, and when it does, she'll understand instinctively. So this is basically confirming a lot about what people have been discussing. The fact that Sarada did not know that she had awakened the Mangekyou sharingan. And this is why I put in one of the titles that Sarada awakens her Mangekyou sharingan, indicating that this was the first time that she knew that she had awakened it. And that's why Sasuke ends up saying, when she fully awakens, indicating her fully awakening her Mangekyou sharingan, she will be able to use it instinctively. And that's exactly what we see taking place in that chapter. So for anybody who is saying that, "Oh, how is Sarada able to use the Mangekyou sharingan ability without any sort of training?" Clearly, you're not reading the Naruto series correctly, because they instinctively understand how to use their powers. It is not something that necessarily takes a training arc or a training session for them to be able to understand to use. Through this dialogue, we have Sasuke prove that they understand their Mangekyou sharingans instinctively. Whether they try new things or find a different way in which they're able to use their Mangekyou sharingan, that will probably take a training arc. But the fact of them being able to use the ability and know what those abilities end up doing is something that comes instinctively, as we're going to see with the likes of Sarada. And this ends up going back to the dialogue that we saw between Boruto and Sasuke in chapter 5. Also, during the time skip arc, the time skip flashback arc, which honestly I love the way they're doing it, coming back in key moments instead of revealing everything at the same time. Ikimoto's cooking with this method of showing us what happened during the time skip, as we are slowly starting to piece things together, not necessarily in a linear manner, as sometimes we go to where Boruto ended up meeting with Kashin Koji, and now we're going to Sasuke and Boruto. I really like the way they're doing so. It keeps people intrigued and we don't know everything that happened in the time skip so far. But what we do know through that dialogue is that when Sasuke was about to end up being turned into a tree, the dialogue before that, we had a Sasuke who essentially told Boruto that his power alongside that of Sarada is going to be what is necessary to prevent a future calamity to come. And this wasn't about omnipotence, it was most likely about the Senju, or something even greater that could end up happening. And that's why seeing Sarada awaken her Mangekyou Sharingan at this moment is quite important and quite intriguing in my personal opinion. And this does reveal something that is quite interesting that I also wanted to point out, is the fact that Sarada awakened her Mangekyou Sharingan almost in defiance of a godly ability, in the one that we see with omnipotence to Ida. So that awakening itself in defiance of a god's ability might be something that is quite crucial, or potentially even a hint towards Sarada having these crazy like abilities or crazy hacks that will allow her to contend with those gods, as that's what her ability did to end up saving Boruto through convincing her father in defiance of the omnipotence. And that's essentially what we end up getting with the sneak peek here. I'm quite hyped for what we're gonna end up getting next. However, this is not the only thing that we do end up getting for today, as we do have this cover of Boruto and Kawaki. And one thing that is quite important to note is the fact that we have Boruto and Kawaki with each of their respective weapons. We have a Boruto. I don't know if this is going to be of the highest quality, as right now I'm reading the one of the low quality since the full HD version hasn't been released. This is simply a leak. However, we have a Boruto with his sword, obviously looking majestic, obviously looking good. However, if you pay attention to Kawaki, you would see that he also has his weapon, and that is one of the staff. Obviously, they are doing it in a subtle way, which could almost seem like it's part of the logo, as I thought at first. However, this clearly is not. This is Kawaki's staff. And what does this tell us about Kawaki? After he fully ends up getting his limiters removed, are we going to see him take up that staff? And is everything starting to lead up to Kawaki getting that scarf, that staff, and this whole different mindset that we see him have in that flash forward scene of the first chapter of the Boruto series? This is quite important because it can either tell us that maybe at the end of this chapter we do end up seeing something quite interesting about Kawaki finally getting these limiters removed, or maybe it will happen sometime in this volume, as I believe the last chapter was the end of a volume, and thus we are starting a new volume right here. So in these next 4 chapters, 3 to 4 chapters that end up concluding a volume, we will end up seeing Kawaki getting his limiters removed. Hopefully we get almost like a sneak peek or a crazy cliffhanger of Kawaki with these abilities and limiters removed, and then he will end up popping in to the Sand Village to end up protecting Konohamaru, almost proving this omnipotence right with a Kawaki who Konohamaru believes to be Boruto, be the one to end up saving him, his students. It would be something quite cool, almost reinforcing omnipotence. Or at least, I hope Kawaki ends up having somebody to fight after these limiters are removed, with a Boruto who pretty much won't have to do much of anything in this arc, as we have currently seen. But what we are seeing right now is our characters getting stronger. The likes of Sarada and the likes of Kawaki, we see both of them getting stronger. A lot of people debate as to who will end up being stronger. I've seen a lot of people discuss who would win in a fight, but if Kawaki gets his limiters removed, I don't know if Sarada's Mangekyou Sharingan abilities are going to be enough to be able to contend. Maybe Kawaki without his limiters and a Sarada with her Mangekyou Sharingan abilities. That may be a closer fight when Sarada will be able to win, but without the limiters, I don't know how that fight would end up going. But one thing I am quite happy that the sneak peek ends up revealing is the fact that it is true that Sarada did not know that she awakened the Mangekyou Sharingan at that moment. It was a topic of debate that a lot of people were discussing, and I didn't know where to lean at until I saw that Sarada actually ended up awakening her Mangekyou Sharingan in that chapter, and then I concluded that it was most likely her not knowing when she awakened it, but it was a topic of contention, and I don't think either or being the case is necessarily bad writing, as I pointed out in other videos discussing that she didn't really have a lot of options as to where she's able to use her Mangekyou Sharingan abilities. So I don't think either of it is bad, but it's quite cool to actually get an answer as to what was the reason why Sarada didn't use the Mangekyou Sharingan. And all we know is that her awakening her Mangekyou Sharingan right now is ultimately leading to her being able to take care of Hidari by herself. And that's what we're going to see eventually at a later date in the Boruto series, in Boruto TBV Vortex. So I'm quite excited to see how it will take place. So those are my thoughts on the sneak peek leak that have come out. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'm out, bruh.